A blockbuster trade agreed to in principle. A superstar's bags literally packed and ready for Baltimore. A sudden, shocking collapse over a failed physical. And now that exact same superstar is back in the building, fully healthy and absolutely terrorizing his own offense in the sweltering heat of the Nevada desert. The NFL is a completely unforgiving league where the incredibly thin line between a multi-year rebuild and an open championship window can hinge on a single, solitary medical report. Think about that for a second. We almost saw a move that would have completely upended the balance of power in the AFC, and instead it created a massive chip on the shoulder of one of the most dangerous edge rushers in football. We're diving straight into the Las Vegas Raiders 2026 training camp today. We need to find out, once and for all, if this rebuilt defensive line, a unit forged in the fires of a totally chaotic offseason, is actually the real deal. Because let's face it, for well over a decade now, the Raiders have been desperately searching for a defensive identity. They need something, anything, capable of surviving the absolute gauntlet of offensive firepower in the AFC West. And they might have finally found it. If you're watching on NFL Nexus, you know how we operate. We don't just read you the headlines. We look at the consequences, the underlying tension, and exactly what happens next. So do us a favor, make sure to subscribe to NFL Nexus, drop a comment with your opinion down below as we go through this, and support the channel by becoming a member. Right, so every single August, fans are just bombarded with these generic camp buzzwords. You look at the screen, accountability, camaraderie, connected. You hear these words repeated by players and coaches across all 32 teams on every single sports network until they lose absolutely all meaning. It's like a script. We are conditioned as fans to just nod our heads. We accept this highly controlled, media-trained optimism, and we just assume it's the exact same PR playbook being read in every single facility across the country. But when you look closely at what is happening right now with the silver and black, a very different and honestly, a much more intense story begins to emerge. It's not about just getting through practice. It's a story about survival. It's about fierce, uncompromising internal competition and an identity being carved out in real time under immense pressure in the desert. I know you guys are exhausted by the usual preseason hype train, so here is our roadmap for today to peel back the layers and uncover what is actually going on in Vegas. First, we'll look beyond those buzzwords, then examine the pure gravity of the Max Crosby effect, check out the new faces, and finally, ask if this culture is real or just a mirage. Let's get into it. Okay, starting with Section 1. We have to look completely past the scripted talking points, because to truly understand a defense, you have to understand the architects. When you're trying to evaluate a defensive unit in August, the contrast between generic PR and reality is usually pretty stark. Normally, if you ask 3 different professional athletes about their new defensive coordinator, you expect 3 heavily sanitized, completely identical answers. You know the drill. Oh, the coaches are doing a great job, we're working hard, taking it one day at a time. It goes in one ear and out the other. But that is absolutely not what happened in Las Vegas this summer. You've got guys like Kwity Paye, Jonah Lalulu, and Thomas Booker all independently praising their newly promoted defensive coordinator, Rob Leonard. And they aren't just giving platitudes. They are using exact, specific, highly tactical details. They didn't just call Leonard a good coach. They specifically pointed out that he's incredibly hands-on. They talked about how he gets in there and physically demonstrates the technique himself. And, critically, they mentioned that he runs a players-led room. Listen, that level of unified, specific alignment, it doesn't happen by accident in the National Football League. It only happens when veterans fully, completely buy into the philosophy of a coach who demands that every single player earns their reps through actual sweat equity rather than just being handed a starting job because of what they did 3 years ago or where they were drafted. Thomas Booker even took it a step further. He emphasized this concept of top-to-bottom accountability. And what that shows us is that the defensive line isn't just an island. They are completely bought into head coach Clint Kubiak's broader vision for this entirely new era of Raiders football. The historical significance of this for the Raiders organization is just massive. Think about their recent history. Clint Kubiak is stepping in and trying to establish a new, fundamentally unshakable culture in a franchise that has desperately, and I mean desperately, sought stability. For years, they've had to sit back and watch rival quarterbacks completely dominate the division. So when a veteran player points out that everyone, literally everyone, regardless of their contract size, their draft pedigree, or how many years they've been in the league, is held to the exact same standard, it sends a profound message. It means the continuity they were hoping for with Rob Leonard's promotion is actually taking root. The coaching staff sets the blueprint, sure, but it's the locker room that is actively policing itself. And that is a total game changer. Moving on to Section 2, and we absolutely have to talk about the man who is the heartbeat of this defense. Frankly, he's the heartbeat of the entire franchise right now, Max Crosby. Crosby's offseason timeline is wild. Honestly, it reads less like a standard NFL offseason and way more like a high-stakes, dramatic movie script. Let's rewind a bit. Back in the spring, a massive blockbuster trade was essentially agreed upon to send Crosby to the Baltimore Ravens. I just want you to pause and think about the sheer scale of that ripple effect for a second. The entire balance of power in the AFC was about to shift. Putting a prime Max Crosby on a defense in Baltimore, that would have altered the playoff trajectory of literally half the league. But then, right on the finish line, the Ravens backed out. They cited a failed physical. Now, for most superstar players in this league, having your bags packed and a trade collapse right out from under you, that would create an incredibly toxic environment. It would fracture the relationship with the front office overnight. You'd see holdouts, you'd see those vague, dramatic social media posts we all know and love, and it would absolutely poison the locker room. But the reality in Las Vegas, Crosby just put his head down. He returned to training camp as a fully healthy, full participant. He didn't just show up to clock in and collect a check. He showed up to absolutely dominate the line of scrimmage and make a massive statement. The crucial point of Crosby's impact really comes down to this one number on your screen, 28. That is the staggering number of tackles for loss Max Crosby racked up in just 15 games last season. And remember, he did this while dealing with the exact same injuries that supposedly scared off the Baltimore Ravens. You add 10 sacks to that total, and you are looking at a walking, talking statistical anomaly. In the modern NFL, a tackle for loss is arguably one of the most devastating things you could do to an opposing offensive coordinator. It completely destroys their entire game script. It takes all the logic out of their play calling. It turns a manageable second and medium into third and long, which forces completely predictable passing situations. And when the offense is forced to pass, that allows the rest of the defensive line to just pin their ears back and hunt. Crosby produced 28 of those crucial negative plays while his body was actively failing him. So now, he's back on the field, he's fully healthy, and he's carrying a massive chip on his shoulder. The rest of the league really needs to take notice, because a motivated Max Crosby out to prove his medical detractors wrong is nothing short of a force of nature. And you can see how this affects the rest of the team. Defensive tackle Thomas Booker brilliantly illustrated this dynamic behind closed doors. He said, and I quote, "He sets the tempo in terms of aggression. He's going to let you know about it. There's no reason why we shouldn't dominate every play." This right here is the psychological contagion effect of having an elite, franchise cornerstone player on your roster. Crosby's relentless motor and his unapologetically aggressive standards are quite literally infecting the entire defensive line during practice. Whether he is leading individual bag drills or completely blowing up an inside run during an 11-on-11 team period, he is demanding absolute, flawless perfection from the men lined up next to him. This is exactly how you elevate a defense from being just statistically average to being genuinely elite. You don't just scheme it up on a whiteboard with X's and O's. You will it into existence through sheer physical aggression and intense peer pressure. All right, let's move to our next section. We need to see exactly how this intense Crosby-led culture is being adopted by the new blood in the building. Because in today's NFL, no superstar edge rusher can win a championship by himself. The Raiders' front office has been incredibly aggressive in reshaping this roster, bringing in a host of new talent who are all trying to prove they belong in this totally revamped system. First, you have seasoned veterans like linebacker Nakobe Dean and defensive lineman Kwity Paye. Paye is entering his 6th season, but it's his first with a brand new franchise, so he's having to navigate a completely new offseason experience and a brand new defensive scheme. But the true crucible of this training camp, where the identity is actually being forged, is the cross-trench warfare happening every single afternoon. The defensive line is constantly sharpening its teeth against premier offensive line additions like Tyler Linderbaum and Spencer Burford. Every single rep out there is a heavyweight battle of grown men trying to establish sheer physical dominance. And perhaps the most inspiring story in this high-stakes environment is the emergence of undrafted rookie linebacker Sion Sloan. Let's be real, in the brutal, unforgiving world of the NFL, undrafted rookies are often just brought in as camp bodies. They are literally there just to absorb refs and get beat up so the starters can rest their legs. But Sloan, he is already earning vital playing time with the main units, and he's drawing unprompted praise from veterans like Paye for his relentless motor. That tells us that Las Vegas is clearly rewarding on-field development and maximum effort, not just looking at a player's draft pedigree or how big their signing bonus was. But guys, if there is one specific name I want you to remember from this explainer today as a dark horse difference maker, it has to be Tonka Hemingway. When you have multiple veterans independently singling out a second-year defensive tackle, completely unprompted by the media, by the way, it speaks absolute volumes about the internal hierarchy and the real respect within that locker room. Hemingway has been universally praised for his incredibly intense off-season work ethic and his highly noticeable physical development. Look, a defensive line rotation in the NFL is a straight-up war of attrition. By the time December rolls around, when the weather turns freezing cold and everyone's bodies are battered and bruised, your depth chart is always tested to its absolute limits. If Hemingway can translate this massive breakout training camp into consistent week-to-week regular season production, he provides the exact kind of interior disruption that prevents opposing offenses from constantly doubling and triple-teaming Max Crosby on the edge. This inside-out pressure, it's exactly how complete championship-caliber defenses are built from the ground up. Which brings us to our final section today. We have to take a step back, look at the big picture of this entire operation, and ask the absolute hardest questions about team building in the modern NFL. Because as fans, we have to view everything we hear in August through a lens of healthy skepticism. Are we actually witnessing a genuine cultural shift in Las Vegas? Or are these players simply using safe, prepackaged catchphrases like iron sharpening iron and brick by brick just to survive a highly controlled training camp without making headlines on ESPN? NFL locker rooms today are increasingly hyper-aware of the 24/7 media cycle. These players know that a single negative comment taken out of context, or even just a brief moment of frustration at a podium, can create an absolute media firestorm that completely derails a crucial week of preparation. For a lot of teams, just avoiding distractions is priority number one, even if it means totally hiding the true, messy state of the roster from the public. But the truth usually lies in the fine details. While those highly repetitive buzzwords are definitely present in Raiders camp, and let's be honest, they always will be in any corporate sports environment, the detailed peer recognition we are seeing points towards something undeniably real happening out in the desert. Take the nuanced interactions between guys like Tono Lalulu and Kwity Paye. They are specifically mentioning each other by name, pointing out tactical improvements, and discussing hand placement techniques. That is incredibly telling. When players are genuinely recognizing each other's physical development and offering real cross-positional support without a reporter specifically asking them to do so, it signals authentic camaraderie. It shows that they are paying incredibly close attention to the grueling, ugly work being put in when the cameras are turned off and the stands are completely empty. This dynamic is perfectly, concisely captured by Thomas Booker, who said recently, "We operate like genuine friends, not just coworkers." I need you to understand how huge that is. In the high-stakes, absolutely ruthless business of professional football, where players are constantly competing for extremely limited roster spots and life-changing money, genuine friendship is incredibly rare. You are essentially competing against the man sitting next to you to feed your family. That is the harsh reality of the league. But sports psychology and NFL history both prove the exact same distinct theory. Constructive critique lands so much better and is absorbed so much faster when it comes from a friend who actually knows you outside the facility, rather than just a colleague who is actively trying to take your spot on the depth chart. If this Raiders defensive line has truly achieved that elusive level of trust, their defensive ceiling is exponentially higher than anyone in the national media is currently projecting. So, where does this leave the 2026 Las Vegas Raiders? I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to take away from this explainer. Talk is incredibly cheap in August. Seriously, everyone in the league is undefeated right now. Everyone is in the best shape of their lives. But what happens to this camaraderie and this highly praised players-led culture when they inevitably get punched in the mouth in week one? What happens in the fourth quarter of a grueling must-win divisional game against Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City or Justin Herbert in Los Angeles? When the lungs are burning, the defense has been on the field for an exhausting 10-play drive, and the entire season feels like it's on the line. If the culture that Clint Kubiak and Rob Leonard are building is actually real, and if the Max Crosby effect truly has infected the fundamental DNA of this roster, then this defensive line is going to answer the bell and completely change the landscape of the AFC. But the true test is coming rapidly, and there is absolutely nowhere to hide on an NFL Sunday. Thank you so much for diving into this deep dive with us today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button for NFL Nexus, comment your opinion down below on whether you think this Vegas defense is a legitimate threat this year, and support the channel by becoming a member. We'll see you in the next explainer.